Welcome to my presentation. I'm Jelle Koolwijk. I'm a part-time PhD student at Delft University of Technology. In this presentation, I will share my insights gained from three consecutive studies that are part of my PhD research project on strategic partnerships in the Dutch construction industry. Why strategic partnerships? Well, as you probably know, buildings in the European Union are responsible for about 40% of the total energy consumption. Increasing the energy efficiency of homes is therefore important to achieve the EU energy efficiency targets and the reduction of CO2 emissions in the European Union. In the Netherlands, about 350 social housing corporations own 2.4 million social rental homes. This is 31% of the total building stocks, a large part of which must be made more sustainable in order to meet the European targets. Um, Housing associations in the Netherlands believe that in order to achieve these goals, they must work more closely together with parties from the construction industry than they did in the past. They are looking for forms of collaboration with market parties to make their real estate more sustainable in a smarter and more efficient way. In other words, that they can do more with less money. Because, well, there's a tremendous pressure to make the building stock more sustainable. They want to make use of the knowledge that is available at the supplying side and also offer them the opportunity to be able to produce more efficiently and therefore cheaper by working with them long term across multiple projects. These housing corporations therefore look for long-term partnerships in which parties can bring their knowledge into the design process and streamline the total production process across multiple projects. In the last 10 years, many social housing corporations have switched to forming strategic partnerships. Some of these partnerships still exist today, while others have fallen apart relatively quickly. This research tries to understand why this happens. For the past 10 years, I've been involved as a partnering consultant in establishing these strategic partnerships in the housing sector. Here you can see one of these partnerships that won a supply chain prize for their work. Basically, these partnerships were set up in the same way with the aim of integrating activities between companies and initiating knowledge sharing between people. Despite the fact that these partnerships were set up in the same way, the way people interact with each other in the partnerships appeared to be different when I was there. I observed different behavior within the design teams. For instance, in a number of teams, people were really sharing ideas very fast, asking open questions to each other, and when they didn't understand things, and were feeling probably safe to speak up when they were having problems. And in other teams, I observed that. It felt like people were trusting each other less and that they were less likely to actually share their ideas and thoughts with each other. So, what I also observed is that the rules that were supposed to lead to integration between companies were also applied differently. In one case, open book accounting, for instance, was used as a tool to share cost information openly and to identify cost reductions. While in another case, the open book accounting was used more as a tool to control the other partners instead of using it as a sort of tool to learn. Um, in this PhD project, I wanted to understand the differences. Why, despite the fact that the integration is designed and implemented in the same way at the company level, people treat each other in different ways and use the rules differently. This personal fascination was the start of my PhD. Um, So the aim of my PhD is to provide insight in the, as we call it, the multi-level interplay between, on one side, the interorganizational structures or rules, and on the other side, the interpersonal relationships such as elements such as trust in project-based organizations in the construction industry. And I specifically focused on strategic partnerships. Okay, let's take a look at the research design. For this research, I used a multi-level mixed method research approach. In the first two studies, I first of all wanted to understand the elements of interorganizational collaboration and also the elements that are important on the interpersonal level. I needed to first understand these elements before I could do further research on the interaction between the two levels. So the first two studies were more quantitative, getting a more general idea about the interorganizational structure and the interpersonal relationships and how they affect the outcomes of projects. And in the third study, I integrated the knowledge of both into a study, and a qualitative study in which I looked at the interaction between the two. Here you can see the methods that I used in the case study. I mainly used open interviews, and I did thematic analysis based on a conceptual framework that was based on the concepts derived from the first two studies. Well, the main finding of my research, or the major finding across the three studies, is that the way integration in supply chain develops is highly dependent on the interaction between project actors. The way actors use inter-organizational rules of a project organizations influence the level of trust and no-blame culture that emerges through interaction. Um, the narratives, mainly in study 3, where I researched 3 cases of strategic partnerships and talked about them, about specific challenges that they encountered and how their interaction developed. The narratives in study 3 showed that as a project progresses, team members face different challenges, such as financial conflicts, and in such scenario, the level of trust can fluctuate. Um, For instance, when a partner does not trust the financial figures presented by one of its partners, this partner can start to change the way the financial rules of the partnerships are used. In one of the cases, I saw that the dominant partner started to use the open book system as a control tool instead of a learning tool. This, while the open book system should be used as a tool to identify potential cost reductions and to learn from, well, where can you do better. This action in turn made the other partners feel distrusted, which caused their relationship to deteriorate, and in the end, it even caused uh, the, the partnership to fail. What they also found is that specifically dominant actors in the supply chain seem to be able to change the rules of the system. This can be a construction client, as this is the sponsor of a project, but also a main contractor that often has a more dominant position over subcontractors in the supply chain. This places dominant actors in the supply chain in a very delicate position. Um, and they should therefore be aware of their power position and the way they use this position in their interaction with the other partners. Well, there are many elements that you could discuss about this. Well, of course, there are 3 studies. I think one of the main points that come forward is that well, there are many researchers that argue that the interaction between actors is mainly determined by the interorganizational context. So by imposing particular interorganizational rules, it is assumed that these actors will start to behave in a required way. I think this PhD project shows that one should not assume that integrated contracts and integrated practices that have been shown to work in one partnership will automatically lead to close and long-lasting relationship between actors in another partnership. For example, when a dominant party uses its position to secure its interest, it can damage mutual trust and lead to long-term relationship being abandoned by one of the partners. I've come to the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.